Namaste and welcome to Urban.chatterati. This is Abhinav Prakash, and today I'm joined by Kushal Mehra to discuss a very interesting topic, which is about Hindu modernity. Do we have anything called Hindu modernity yet? Is there an idea for modernity in India? And can we argue that Hindutva is basically the Hindu modernity that we see in 21st century? So Kushal, welcome to the show.
Namaste, Abhinav. Thanks for inviting me. As always, it's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Kushal, for coming. So let's start by asking the basic question. What is modernity?
Well, Abhinav, that's actually a very good way to start. So let's say modernity, if I would say, is a process where we have certain cultural and intellectual changes. Now, as far as the West is concerned, this was a very specific period in the time and history of the West. Now, there are some disputes about the dates when it comes to Western countries and Western culture. But by and large, people say modernity is divided into three phases, which they say early modernity, classical modernity, and late modernity. Early modernity, some people say starts with 1500s, the printing press. Some people say 1453, some people say 1436. And it goes on till say, 1789 in some traditional historiographical records. Then comes the phase of your classical modernity, which is basically includes a lot of the Enlightenment era and all those things. And then there is again the phase of late modernity where the dates have a lot of debate. So, some people will say the dates when it comes to late modernity are up to 1930s or something. Then a particular set will say, no, it is not 1930s. It is 1945, World War II. Some people say it is not even that. It goes right up to the 1990s. So this is the division of the three eras of modernity. Obviously, there are defining characteristics of modernity. So, I'll not state all of them because they're like 10, 15. But by and large, modernity consists of a focus on rationality, a movement towards secularization, a movement of homogenization of thought. That is a very interesting characteristic of modernity in the West. Industrialization, obviously. And by and large, upheavals and changes in the social thought process of a society, where, let's say, two major examples would be the secularization of Western society, where the classical Catholic Church and how the church had a stranglehold on Western society and Western thought was challenged by the process of modernity, which starts from the Protestant ethic and then goes on into Enlightenment thinkers, basically leading to the absolute separation of church and state in Western thought. And in the field of science, where a lot of established belief at one point of time in the field of science, especially in physics or cosmology, was based on biblical notions. And that started getting challenged, obviously. Galileo and many other people, for that matter, started challenging it. And so these processes and the byproducts of these processes is what led to what is classically known as modernity in Western thought. It was a phase-wise process. It was a long, drawn-out process of 500 years to 600 years. And those changes that came about in the society is basically what modernity is.
Well, that's a very comprehensive overview of the Western process. But, if you look at the word, that it's only the West which has a model which can be called the modernity. Or maybe the Japanese also have it, but Japan is too small in size. It does not have that much influence on the outside world. So when you look at the world today, it's only the West which has the model which people want to adopt or they aspire towards. The Islamic world is trying to create their own version of modernity. The Chinese are trying to do the same, but so far they have not been successful. So what led to the Western modernity? What exactly, led to the situation that only West not only dominates in the terms of science and technology and so on, but also in the terms of the social transformation?
I think actually it has a lot to do with the way Christianity and the Protestant ethic was structured. I think one of the best things to understand why the West became the way it is, if I remember country correctly, it's actually so pathetic on my part that I only had recommended that book to most people, and now I have forgotten the name of that book. It was, it was I think Joseph Henrich's book. मुझे नाम याद नहीं आ रहा है उसका. The latest book by Joseph Henrich, he basically goes through the entire process of what. So basically, he calls them weird nations, right? We are Western, educated, whatever that acronym is, weird, that stands for. So why are weird nations unique? And then he goes into details of what led to the foundation of these weird nations, why they are successful. And one of the major things actually he talks about in that entire process is the natural structure of the Protestant ethic and how much of a role Christianity played in pushing it. So I'm not saying Christianity is the reason for modernity. The Christian edifice is the reason for their change. Because the Christian, see, you have, if you look at it in a very weird way, it's a very exclusivist way of looking at the world, right? It's obsession with exclusivism. And coupled with that, it's obsession with homogeneity. Because Christianity believes in, and coupled with the savior complex. It's a different kind of Tridev coming at you. There is exclusivity, homogeneity, and the savior complex. And these three, when you put them together, so even when these churns are happening in the Western world, so it's a very unique experience to the Western world. But in spite of it being a unique experience in the Western world because of the unique nature of Christianity, I think you raised a very important point here, that I think a lot of times people tend to overplay this, in my opinion. You don't have to have the exact replica of how modernity has played out in the West. You can have certain universal changes in society and universal principles in society. See, people forget at the end of the day, we're all Homo sapiens. We will have at the base level certain universal traits, certain universal characteristics, certain universal behavioral patterns. So while I understand that the Chinese are trying to draw their own Western modernity, but let's get real. What the Chinese are doing is, it's a state-funded capitalism. So they have become very free in their capitalism. Now, the only thing the Chinese don't like is they don't want to make their society culturally like the West. So they are resisting that change. But that does not mean that if they removed that control, it will not become like the West. So what the Chinese is doing is actually delaying the inevitable. So it doesn't mean that that process or that modernity thought change will not happen in China. It's just that they are becoming a top-down society that is actively enforcing its view. The same could be the case in Japan, where there is, look, people may not like it, but Japan is also a pretty close society. No, I'm not saying it's like China, but it's a pretty close society. They're very insular in their culture. So in my view, a lot of similarities, if we were to look at what would happen in India, the probabilities of what is happening in the West happening in India are far more, is because of the inherent nature of our society. Historically, we've been pretty open as a society. Now, even if we took the Aryan invasion, Aryan migration as to be true on face value, now I'm agnostic to that subject. I'm neither pro OIT nor pro AIT. I'm someone who's genuinely agnostic to that subject. But my point is, even if as a baseline example, I take it that the IVC people were the native inhabitants, no matter whatever you want to call them. And then the people from the steppes came in. There has been a consistent culture of assimilation in this society. Now, the only breakage in that culture, till some extent, comes in when the universalist, exclusivist meme enters India. The steppe meme entered India, assuming the steppe meme came from outside. I'm being very open and honest here. That meme adjusted in India. It became very Indian. So I think a lot of times people think that because modernity has not played out exactly the way it has in China and in Japan, it's going to play out in India. I'm not really sure of that. I'm not saying it will be exactly like the West, but it will be a lot more like the West than China or Japan. In the case of India, is because of the inherent plurality of Indian society. It has nothing to do with the West. The West has got nothing to do with it. But in my view, yes, the West is unique in many ways, the reasons I said. And trust me, you have to read that book by Joseph Henrich of why the West became the way it is. I think it opens up one's mind to a lot of unique sociological movements in the West and why it ended up being the way it is. But I think if India, and obviously in my own monologue on my channel, I did go on to explain why I think India is not becoming that way. And there are 4 factors for that I state. And the moment India does those 4 things, I think India will by and large become like the West, in not in culture, but in its overall structure as a society. So while I do understand that the process has played out to its fullest in the West, well, one of the reasons it has played out to its fullest in the West is it basically started from the West. The industrial revolution and the change in science. अभी ऐसा है ना कि अगर आप वहां से चालू करोगे तो naturally they will always have the beginner's advantage, because all the experiments are going to be happening on them first and then on the rest of the world, for whatever reasons, through colonization or now through trade and globalization, where there is a free exchange of ideas and cultures in that sense. But let's see how it plays out.
Now let's come to the Hindu modernity. You define the Western modernity into early modern period, classical period, and so on. So how would you define Hindu modernity, and do we also have those phases playing out before us?
Absolutely. In fact, I believe in Hindu modernity starts way before Western modernity, in my view. And now people can completely dismiss my view, call it bogus, call it wrong, and fine. It's a free world. Yaar, matlab main kaun sa bada ye hu. So, but I believe that India, if we are to take the standard definition of modernity being where you have, intellectual movements and cultural movements and even economic movements for that matter, ideas that transform the way a society functions, I believe the first major breakage in Indian society comes in the form of the Bhakti movement. So if I was to, and the Bhakti movement is way before, 1436 or 1453 or 1500s. The Bhakti movement, you start traces of it at least 400 years before this entire process starts. 11th century mein hua hai, 12th century mein hua hai, 13th century ke saints hain. I'm not going to take names because everybody knows the names of the Bhakti saints. But why I believe that the Bhakti movement is the quintessential early modernity phase of Hindu society. I'm talking about Hindu society. I'm being very clear. I am not speaking on behalf of Muslim society or Christian society here in India. I am exclusively focused on Hindus. The movement of Hindus, and my definition of a Hindu is one who is not a Christian, a Jew, and a Muslim. And that's my definition of a Hindu. Yeah. Outside of that, now, if you look at that society, you see now people can come up and say, but why not Buddha? I was like, the Buddha is, while the Buddha did form a new panth, he did not, I think Buddhism did not have the prerequisite changes in the society, because the edifice of the caste order stayed even when Buddhism and Jainism were at their plum. The real challenge to Jati Varna as a system comes basically from the Bhakti movement, where the Bhakti movement is not, let's say, a rejection of Hinduism. A Bhakti movement is a system where they say, we are here, we are Hindu, we are staying inside, we are forming our own thing, and we are challenging each and every norm that you have said. So you say we cannot learn XYZ scripture, we learn all of them. You say we have no access to your divine. Well, you know what? We will not go to your divine. We will bring the divine out of your sanctorum in the temple. We will create our own divine standard, and we'll do all the things that you were doing. We're just taking the ownership and the mantle away from you. That's a classical modernity process, challenging the social norm and taking it to the next level and upgrading it. I don't believe Buddhism and Jainism in that sense upgraded anything. They just had intellectual quibbles. That's all it was. It was, and again, this is not that I don't like Jainism and Buddhism. I'm someone who's a huge fan of Jainism and Buddhism at a philosophical level. But my point is that I don't think so it qualifies at early modernity. Buddha and Mahavira don't. This definitely, if I was to say, the signs of early modernity in India are like 11th century, 12th century. And obviously, it's a long drawn out process. And in a very weird way, I think early modernity in India goes on for too long a time. And that is one of the reasons that early modernity in India fails in a very weird way, because even with them, what happens is, in my reading and my observation is, they do something. They challenge the norm. They don't take it to the next level. So what they do is, They create their own panth. So you have different panths. So if you see the early signs of the Bhakti movement start, and then you have the entire Kabir Panthi movement, 15th century, 16th century, 17th century. मगर हो रहा ये है कि हर आदमी आता है, I don't know how else to say, वो अपना पंथ शुरू कर देता है या अपने बाबे बना देते हैं ये लोग. हर आदमी बाबा बन जाता है. And you just keep having baba ya babiya, female version, male version, and all you have is different punts coming up. And yeah, you can quibble about small things here and there. No, Nanak said this, or Kabir said that, or Ravidas said this, or the Udasis in the Sikh movement said that, or Falane ne ye bola. But the point is, they were pretty much behaving in the same pattern. They challenge the modus operandi is very simple. They were part of a larger group. That larger group was, not giving them privileges. They basically do all the things that larger group was doing, but they do it for themselves. They do all the things that were not allowed in the larger group. They break from them, form their own group, and they stay within the fold. And because they did not go to that next level, now there could be multiple reasons for that. I have no idea why. One of them could be that the early modernity.
No. What is this? What is this next level you're talking about? They did not go to
the next level. The next level, according to me, is technological changes. The next level would be changes in the structure of society, changes in governance caused by social upheaval, changes in laws. The laws, I don't mean like a constitution. See, even before democracies, people had rule books. My question is, India barely had any rule book changes. It was the king, and the king would just govern by his own way. There were no significant changes in India in terms of governance systems. Even when the Mughals came, the Mughals put a jizya, Mughals put this or that. But beyond that, larger part of Hindu society was being self-governed. They were governing themselves by their own rules, right? They were not governing themselves by Mughal rules. Like when I say significant changes in landholding patterns, significant changes in those things, were they happening? Like you have to go all the way during the Maratha times, and then you have some semblances of landholding patterns or something, or even into the far later stages in Punjab. At least I'm a little bit aware of Punjab, where landholding patterns are changing. But I'm not saying they were changing in benefit of the Dalit society. Don't get me wrong. They were changing in screwing them even more. That's my point. So it was not in favor of Dalits, it was against Dalits. But my point is that when I say changes, there was nothing really. The only thing that was changing is more and more groups were propping up, but no significant change in any sort of governance system was happening because of that.
Basically, no corresponding material change.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, right. But let's say that's true. I mean, many people have pointed this out, that Bhakti movement was actually the expression of early modernity in India. And it's very clear if you read the literature, if you look at it, the arguments or the ideas which form the modernity were already present. But let's say, I mean, what happened after that is debatable, why it could not happen. There are various arguments around it. But then we see the revival of similar kind of movements in the colonial period, and most notably the rise of Hindutva. How do you see them? How do you see them, the reform movements in the 19th century, and then the rise of the Hindutva movement, especially from the Savarkar? Do you see that that strand of Hindu thought will become the Hindu modernity?
Absolutely, Abhinav. I think so. Now we are entering into what I would like to call the phase of classical modernity in India, phase 2, and which is where I believe India is actually, even as of now, this very moment that you and I are chatting, on the eve of our Independence Day, 15th August ke eve pe hum baat kar rahe hain, and I think even now we are still stuck in phase 2 of modernity. We are still in classical modernity. We'll discuss the reasons later on, but let's unpack this. Now in classical modernity, now people can come back to me, Are Kushal, magar when you say classical modernity, you singled out it starts at 1828 with the Brahmo Samaj. Then maybe some years later on, 1875 था अभिनव, आर्य समाज की फाउंडिंग डेट कब थी? मुझे याद नहीं आ रही आर्य समाज की फाउंडिंग डेट. I honestly don't remember the exact date Arya Samaj was formed. Yes, 1875. Then Hindu Mahasabha in 1915 and Sangh in 1925. Now somebody can come back and tell me, why isn't Mahatma Phule, Jyotiba Phule, he's also part of Hindu modernity? And I agree. So I have two large camps of Hindu modernity. One camp is the Brahmo Samaj, Jyotirao Phule. I'm just using Brahmo Samaj as one example. I never said he's the only example. I'm saying that is the starting point of classical modernity in India, phase 2, where a new reality has come in India. What is that new reality? Angrez Raj kar rahe hain. There is a new elite. So you have to understand Indian modernity. See, all changes are driven by the elites. Whether you like it or not, everything is elite driven. Very few major societal changes come from bottom up. Bhakti movement was an extraordinary change where it was literally bottom up. But the case of classical modernity in India is a clear-cut case where there is a new Raja in town in terms of the elite class. This elite class is shaping our reality, and they are bringing in Western thoughts. And you have to remember that classical modernity in the West was very robust and built by that time, right? The Enlightenment period was literally at its aplomb as in it is a maturity phase. So those remnants of that culture is also effective in India. And in that, you have these two thoughts developing. The early thought were people who were, I'm not saying this in a pejorative way before somebody gets it. I'm just looking at it as an outsider observing these things. These are very much people who genuinely loved and cared for India, whether it's Raja Ram Mohan Roy or Mahatma Phule. My point is that they did things in a very Orientalist way. To be very honest, they had Hindu elements to it, they had Indic elements to it, but their outlook was way more Orientalist. And we can judge their success by whatever standards we want to. They had a certain level of success. But for classical modernity to really succeed in India, it needed an Indian template, which is by and large a Hindu template, whether we like it or not. Even today, when we say templates in India, the larger template in India is the Hindu template. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. With the Pew polls, we clearly know India is still a largely at the level of the mimetic makeup, a very Hindu country. I think Arya Samaj is the quintessential Indian modern movement, where not only does Arya Samaj challenge dogmas, it challenges dogmas and demands legal changes. If you look at the interaction of Arya Samaj at the legal level with the British, now somebody might come back and say, but the Brahmo also did it. Yes, they did. But the reach of the Brahmo Samaj was very limited. Arya Samaj की लीच कितनी थी? आर्य समाज की स्थापना होती है गुजरात में, और आर्य समाज की सबसे ज्यादा पावर कहाँ होती है? पंजाब, नॉर्दर्न बेल्ट्स में. वहां पे आर्य समाज की पावर कितनी थी? तो पूरा आपका गुजरात, वेस्टर्न इंडिया, सेंट्रल इंडिया, Northern India, Arya Samaj hota hai. And people don't realize that even Savarkar is on record saying that Hindu Mahasabha is basically an offshoot and a much more refined version of the Arya Samaj. And then you have something like the Hindu Mahasabha coming in. Matlab Hindu Mahasabha ne to kya ki? Arya Samaj was in boxing terms was jabbing. Hindu Mahasabha just took a javelin throw and just stuck it everybody, the dagger up everyone's. And then the Sangh, obviously Sangh was founded by one of the Hindu Mahasabhites itself. But the point is, when the Sangh comes in and the Sangh realizes, okay, these movements are too individual centric. Okay, Arya Samaj, Dayanand Saraswati, Swami Shraddhanandji, they collapse, the entire edifice collapses. Hindu Mahasabha, we are seeing, they're too Savarkar centric. Everything is about Savarkar. What Savarkar says is this, Savarkar says that. I'm not saying Savarkar is not good, he's amazing. But the point is that it was too individual driven. And Arya Samaj then comes with the first, and this I believe is a humongous intellectual change, where an organization comes in India that the individual does not matter at all. And it says, let us formulate an ideology, a distinct ideology where the individual does not matter. We keep on investing in the idea and we keep on doing it. And I believe it is the Sangh now that is the quintessential classical modernity of Hinduism, where Sangh believes in gradualism, unlike the smash bang way of the Hindu Mahasabha. Look, I mean, if you look at the things Savarkar was demanding, Sahabhojan, and all those things, like, imagine Savarkar was demanding these things in 1920s India. I mean, it is revolutionary. Nothing short of revolutionary what Savarkar was doing. The Sangh, on the other hand, said, we will do all these things. We'll just do it silently, gradually. We will understand the social realities of the country. Also, we will keep on molding. So if I go to an area where meat eating is very common amongst Hindus, in those jatis, meat eating is a major thing. We will become like them. We will mold ourselves, but we will slowly bring these people together, bring these people together. Also, at the same time, we will bring in new norms of governance. We'll tell these people that these are your rights. This is a new reality. We let us change to the reality. We will tell these people there are new ways of making money. Let us break the old norms. Let us adopt these new economic norms. People don't realize unions. There unions in classical modernity in early modernity in India. People don't realize that the biggest union in India is, even to this very moment, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. They have the biggest union in India. Isn't that a humongous economic change in the outlook of the biggest Hindu organization in the country, which has the biggest union? Now, these things, now, as a laissez-faire capitalist, I have huge problems with unionism. But the point is, my likes or dislikes don't matter. This is a significant thought change and an adoption of a new economic model of unionism by arguably the largest social organization of India. How is that not classical modernity? I don't know.
A very interesting point that you were saying that the Sangh has now become the fulcrum of Hindu modernity, something which will trigger a lot of people, especially on the liberal and the left side, who always write the regressive formation of RSS or regressive, ideas of RSS. Hindutva is regressive, and Prime Minister Modi is imposing regressive idea of Hindutva on India, whereas Hindutva is the modernity in India. So how do you explain this thing that the people who supposedly are the votaries of modernity are against modernity in India?
Well, because they are driven by political tribalism, and their essence is not driven by the search for the truth. Their essence is driven by political tribalism, and these are elites who are worried that they're losing power politically. The thing about the Indian elite has been, which is the left-wing elite forever, is that they were so used to being in power. If you give me a moment, I will, I want to praise the RSS here. So, Abhinav, just give me a moment to praise the RSS here, and I have to pull it out from my Kindle. I think I was just going through the archives, and I don't know what it is. I was telling Vikram Sampath when I was talking to Vikram offline, and Vikram and I were having a conversation, and I told him, "Yaar, Vikram, तुमने मेरा काम बड़ा आसान कर दिया." And Vikram was like, "क्या काम मैंने तेरा आसान कर दिया?" I was like, "It took me 1 year to read this or that and this and that, but you basically summarized it all for me in one book, and तुमने मेरी life बना दी." Now, I want to read something from what the British intelligence thought of RSS in 1940. So this is a secret report of the government dated 30th November 1943, detailing certain concerns about the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. And I'm reading it verbatim. Members of the Sangh are believed to exist in government services, and according to an unconfirmed report intentionally omitted for the survey pending verification, in the armed forces as well. In the central provinces, the Sangh claims amongst its members a number of employees serving in certain security installations. Such information as we have been able to collect of its secret activities suggests that this organization is both intensely communal and anti-British in outlook, and that its tone is becoming increasingly militant. Now, why have I read this? This is written in 1943. We are today in 2021. The British intelligence was spot on, because the Sangh is everywhere. Because the Sangh is in judiciary, the Sangh is in bureaucracy, the Sangh is in politics, the Sangh is in your elite class. It has planted its seeds. The Sangh believes in gradualism. In an evolutionary timeline, there are two ways of judging things. One is punctuated equilibrium, where nothing changes for a while, and suddenly an explosion happens and you have a change. And gradualism is basically slowly and surely things keep changing. I believe what Sangh is doing to Indian society which is why classical modernity in India, in my view, is very elongated and continues till today. It's because of the Sangh and its policy of gradualism. It believes in bringing people together. But this paragraph actually proves what Sangh is. Now, why does the left hate them? It hates them for these very reasons. Because the Sangh planted these seeds in different parts of society, it took them time to become the essence of India. When I say not every Indian, obviously, but a significant chunk of Indians now align with the Sangh ideology. Now, if the left is correct, then see, the left would say the Sangh is casteist, but they're not, because they are the most vehement anti-casteism vehicle in India. The left will accuse them of being against reservations, but they're not. They are the biggest votaries of caste-based reservations in India. Guru Golwalkar, now I may have disagreements with many of his views, but the point is, in the 1960s, the entire sabha of the different, in charges of the pithams and the mathams, and to denounce caste openly on a united Hindu platform, to the chagrin of Karpatri Maharaj. If people remember that, Karpatri Maharaj was not very happy about it, but the Sangh got it done. So whatever the left considers to,
yes. Vishnu Hindu Parishad, which is part of Sangh Parivar.
Yeah, so basically, मगर Guru Golwalkar का बहुत बड़ा हाथ था उसमें. I mean, it is written in RSS archives that Guru Golwalkar was the driving force, and there is even a story where Guru Golwalkar, normally was a very calm and composed person, was so ecstatic and elated at that time. But the point is that even if we ask the left, okay, what is your definition of modernity? No caste. Sangh supports it. What is your definition of modernity? We should give positive discrimination in the Rawlsian way. The Sangh 100% believes in the Rawlsian ethic of positive discrimination. If they say homosexuality should not be, a crime, the Sangh is the only organization in India that did not oppose the Supreme Court judgment. Now, I'm not saying I agree with their entire stand in totality, but the point is, the Sangh did not oppose it. It was the church and the mosque that opposed it, and continues to till this day. So how is the Sangh not pushing Indian modernity? और मैं कोई बात बताओ, कम्युनिस्ट और लेफ्ट वालों को सुनता कौन है? उनको कोई सुनता नहीं है ना, सुनता तो सिर्फ संघ को है ना.
But let's say, you're saying we're still in the classical modernity. Will we have a proper modern Hindu society? Because now you have the material changes also happening on the ground, rapid urbanization, you have political change, greater democratization, greater female participation in the workforce, and the consequent equality, and so on. So do you think that we are now moving towards a proper, or let's say we're moving towards a modern Hindu nation, which the ideologues of Hindutva always envisioned?
I think the problem, I would say my answer is partially yes, and a partial note of caution. Partially yes, because after 1990s, we did adopt some free market principles, and that led to humongous urbanization of India. See, otherwise, I mean, we are both 80s children. I mean, I'm 81. You're obviously slightly younger to me. But as far as I remember growing up, मतलब मुंबई, दिल्ली, कलकत्ता, चेन्नई या और 2-3 शहरों के बाहर क्या था? मतलब लिटरली भारत कुछ था नहीं. अभी आज भारत में कम से कम नहीं तो आप बोल सकते हो 25 से 50 शहर हैं, शहर जिनको हम शहर कह सकते हैं. तो definitely we are going, and even if we go by the most conservative estimates, I mean, you and I had a detailed podcast on my channel about this, where even the most thorough survey says 47% of India is urban. So what I'm saying is, my point is that yes, if urbanization is one of the criterias of achieving full-flown modernity, where you enter the third phase, which is the late modernity, India has taken the first baby steps toward it, because 47% of India is urban, and which has led to significant drop in casteist tendencies, more adoption of free market policies in the urban centers. But here's my note of caution. While we have changed and we are moving, but I still think we have not successfully urbanized to the point of reaching the late phase of modernity. So I would say we reached the late phase of modernity where at least 75% of India is urban, in the sense of how Mumbai is urban. Second, I believe we still don't follow a lot of free market principles in India. Yes, we have some, but I believe I would expect more, especially as a voter of BJP. I expect, and I have a lot of hopes and positivity where I see the baby steps being taken, and I think we are moving towards that. I mean, the recent decision to remove retrospective taxation made me so happy. I was as happy as I was in 1992 when markets were open. That's how happy I was. To me, that was such a significant decision. So that is somewhere, I would say. But one thing scares me a lot about India, and this is where I think we might fail in our project, is we are not rapidly industrializing. Now, and I'll explain my fear why we might get stuck in classical modernity is we have a 20 to 25-year window to industrialize. That's it. Because after that, 3D printing will become in a cheaper fashion in India. And once 3D printing comes, industrialization, you can kiss goodbye to it. Robotics will completely take over. So right now we are in a phase, Abhinav, where we have a 2-decade period of industrial. So when we say industrialization, we basically say low skill to semi-skilled jobs, which basically create a society where people have discipline. They have the discipline of getting up in the morning, going to a place where they are used to following norms, used to following systems. It creates certain cognitive changes in us sociologically. Those cognitive changes are very important for a society to go to the next level of late modernity. We can do that. I mean, Arvind Panagaria explains it beautifully in his book, especially when he says the apparel industry could be the gold mine for India, because China is clearly now in the final stage where they are really not interested in apparel and those kinds of low skilled to semi-skilled jobs. They are giving it away, and Bangladesh seems to be lapping them up. So I'm very scared that we need to take those jobs up. We may urbanize. We may even give equal rights. I think that's not the issue in India. But what we may fail in is industrialization. And it really scares me. To be very honest, I'm very worried about our country, because these 2 decades, the next 2 decades, are extremely crucial for India. I think Indians are betting too much on robotics and the technology movement, where they think, we will leapfrog the requirement of industrialization. I believe the cognitive changes and the cognitive benefits of industrialization are too important for us to leapfrog it.
I agree to this point, because industrialization is not just about setting up factories or having some machineries. It's also a socio-political transformation. Industrialization creates a completely new man whose work ethics, outlook, perception, vision, everything is different from a pre-industrial society. So that process needs to happen in India, and so far it has not happened in India. But let's hope that in the coming 1 or 2 decades, we will see greater industrialization of the Indian society. But Kushal, thanks a lot for your time. It is a very interesting topic, and you understand that one discussion cannot do justice to this, but we have to save something for the next time as well. But thanks a lot for your wonderful insights.
Thanks a lot for calling me, Abhinav. In fact, I got interested in this discussion because we had a telephonic conversation a year and a half ago where you had told me, "Yaar, I think Hindutva is something like Hindu modernity." And I was like, let me test this claim. And then I went back to my father's old library and I started picking Hindi books. और मैं हिंदी की किताबें पढ़ना शुरू किया, पुस्तक पढ़ता था. और तब मुझे याद आया, क्योंकि क्या होता था कि मैं आर्य समाज घर में था, तो आई टुक मेनी थिंग्स फॉर ग्रांटेड कि हमको आदत थी आर्य समाजी कस्टम्स की. एंड देन आई रियलाइज, नहीं, अभिनव तो सही बात कर रहा था. एंड देन व्हेन आई रेड इट एंड इट कल्मिनेटेड इन मी रीडिंग Vikram's second volume. So actually credit goes to you.
Oh, thanks a lot, Kushal. Thanks a lot. I hope this reading and rethinking will continue among the youth of India. But thanks a lot, Kushal, and thanks a lot, audience, for listening to us. Hope you like this channel. Please write in the comments that what do you think about this entire concept and idea of Hindu modernity. And also please subscribe to the channel, and also you can join as a member to support the channel. Hoping to see you soon next time on some other interesting topic. Thank you.